an introduction. So I'm Rachel, and pronouns are she, her. I'm part of the Active Knots, Active Derbyshire team. I'm here really just to facilitate today's conversation. As always, with talking spaces, they're a place for us to sort of come together and learn and share. We have got some brilliant speakers today, some local examples of some great work that's happening around this topic of creating safe spaces for the LGBTQ plus community. And we've got some really interesting bits of sort of research and national work that we're going to put into the session as well. So lots to get through. I'm going to, if we move to the next slide, thanks, Katie. Quick bit of context for me before I'm going to hand over so he knows that he's next to Mark if he's ready to go in about 5 minutes. So the reason that we're here today is we want to talk about lived experience in this space, and we want to be, broadly speaking, talking about how we enable more people to move more in a way that works for them, and really sort of honing in on this community, sharing that lived experience, because we sort of know and understand that some of our communities are facing more barriers than others, and often this can be linked to things like safety and confidence, and I'm sure you'll hear things around safety and confidence throughout the session today. Please ask questions throughout. We'll use the chat function. We will monitor that, and where we've got time, we will also sort of bring questions to speakers if that's okay. So we'll do our best to sort of get through things. Next slide from me, please, Katie. So just a very quick bit of context before I hand over to Mark. There's just a couple of slides here around what that need is. So just for the sort of context, and we are in Pride Month. It is a celebration, and it will always be a celebration and should be, but it's also giving attention to some of the challenges that this community are kind of facing. And you'll see some stuff there that there's some kind of community-wide, society-wide kind of challenges around hate crimes, which are significantly growing. And then you'll see some of the challenges more in that kind of community, that sort of sporting specific context in terms of how people feel included or not, and some of the discrimination that people are facing. So just that context to remind us before we go into the session in terms of why are we here. I think there's one more, just to draw our attention to a couple of bits of research and insight before we get going. This is the slide deck that we will share and put on the website at the end of the session. And one of the last slides in it is a whole bunch of kind of resources and links. So it includes this. So this is from Sport England. It's called Buddle, if you haven't seen that resource before. And it kind of, again, gives some of that context that I mentioned before around discrimination and so on. But it also talks around some tips. So if you're talking to people wanting to advocate and influence and just sort of raise the profile of how we can be more inclusive, there's some tips there which are really quite useful. So it goes into details around inclusive comms, kind of encouraging people to think about using gender neutral language, pronouns. It talks about how you can sort of get behind celebrating diversity with things like the Rainbow Laces campaign, some practical bits. And again, I think we'll hear quite a lot of practical bits today as well. Next one, please. So we're also, thanks, Katie. So this is just to highlight a really brilliant piece of research that has been done in Manchester by Greater Manchester Moving and the LGBT Foundation. So more specifically into the trans and non-binary community. And there was a brilliant piece of research that was done. And so if you want to become more familiar with lived experience in that space, I'd really encourage you to go and read this, because there's a really great piece which gives you an appreciation for some of the challenges that people are facing in that community in particular. And what it then does is outline these 5 key recommendations, again, practical stuff that we can be doing in the sector to be making those small adaptations to, thanks Emily, just put it in the chat, there's the link, to create changes to help people feel more inclusive, which is a bit of a theme of today in terms of what are the little bits that we can all be doing, how can we be adapting our practice. I think that might be the last one, Katie, if you flick it over to the next one. Thank you. I'm going to bring in Mark. So we're going to have a couple of local stories, and Mark is one of them. Mark, are you off mic? Can you just come in and say hello so that I know you're there?
Hi, sorry, there's two
Hello.
of us.
Oh,
There's
brilliant.
me and Adam on the
Ah,
call today
brilliant.
from
Hi,
Nottingham
Mark
Hello.
Front
and
Runners.
Adam. Welcome to you both. Thank you so much. So Mark and Adam are going to talk to us about Notts Frontrunners. Mark and I imagine Adam as well, sorry, are the founders of the group, and are just going to talk to us for the next 10 minutes or so just about how they've set up and share some of their stories. So I think there's a couple of questions just to ask you, Mark, and feel free to go on and kind of tell the whole story if you'd like. But the first thing I wanted to ask you was just, give us an idea of how the group started. Why did you start it? What did it look like initially?
Nottingham Front Runners started probably, it's just about 3 years ago. We're coming up to our third birthday. Me, Adam and Pete, who can't join us today, we're running in another running club. And we ran in Rainbow Laces, and that's how we met. We'd never heard of Front Runners. Front Runners is a international community. Yesterday we celebrated International Front Runner Day. It began in the 70s, and through our kind of friendship and running and entering races like the Paris Marathon, we came across this movement called Front Runners, and we just decided this is what Nottingham needs. Is there anything you want to add, Adam?
Yes, we'd been training for Paris Marathon together, and in particular at Paris Marathon, the Paris frontrunners hosted a bit of a cheer zone along the course, and we were sort of blown away by it really, and thought that's when we started to investigate what it was all about. And before setting it up, we sort of travelled to different front runner clubs in the UK. I think there's 16 clubs across the UK now, to sort of see how everyone else does it. Everyone works in different ways. Some are affiliated with England Athletics, some aren't. Some are paid memberships, some aren't. So we kind of thought, what's going to be best, the best fit for Nottingham. And we wanted to try and make it as accessible as possible. So that's why we're 100% free, thanks to predominantly the Spencer Trust. But yeah, after seeing what sort of impact it makes in other cities, we thought it's definitely something that Nottingham needed. And that's why we decided to pull the trigger and go for it, really. It was a bit scary, but people turned up. People actually came, so it was great.
We were part of another running club, which was a free social club, and we were also part of an England Athletics club. And at the same time as starting Front Runners, England Athletics were putting out a lot of policy that was excluding trans members, banning trans participation in races, and that kind of happening at the same time. So we were starting this group where we're trying to encourage people to come running and get out and meet the community and run together, whilst also up against a big barrier in sport where the headlines are saying people shouldn't, can't take part in these groups, can't be members. We wanted to bring people together at a time where, it was excluding the people that we wanted to get out moving as well.
Can you just go on maybe to say a bit about how the group then developed from that point? So you've come together, you recognise the need, and just tell us kind of, I guess actually, if you talk about what that offer looks like now in terms of, because I know you have kind of diversified and you've got different sessions. What does that look like, and how does that help create an inclusive space for the community, do you think?
Well, we've always ran on Tuesdays, come rain or shine or Boxing Day or New Year's Day or whatever day it's been. If it's been a Tuesday in the last 150 weeks, we ran the 5K, and that's what we call our core group. But since then, the community that we've built have stepped forward and made other offers that are also free, like our Sunday long runs, our trail running group, but most recently our Flinter group. Adam, do you want to talk about Flinter?
Yeah, so we sort of identified that, particularly from our own personal experience in our sort of England Athletics affiliated group that we were in, running groups especially in Nottingham, but more broadly, quite often tend to be white men, particularly middle-aged white men. And we've identified that even within our community, the LGBTQ plus community, the membership that were coming to frontrunners tended to be white gay men, predominantly. And we also identified that as 3 white gay men who started a running club, that wasn't maybe sending out the right message. And we did have some trans and women and non-binary representation, but as a percentage, it was a lot smaller. So we worked with some of our current members from the Flinter community and launched Flinter Thursdays. And it's our women's non-binary trans plus asterisk run. So essentially anyone who's not a cis man using he, him pronouns, that's what it's there for. And we've actually noticed that whilst it has definitely brought a bigger diversity mix into the core run on a Tuesday, there are also a lot of people that are coming to Flinter Thursdays because they feel comfortable there and just enjoying that, which is also great because it's providing an extra space, an extra option in the calendar.
It's the last couple of months, I think it's really grown, particularly with lighter nights and warmer runs. That Flinter group has really grown recently, and I know Elliot, who leads it, is really proud of that membership growing, and so are we.
Thanks for sharing that bit. I mean, I just, I think that term for me was a new one recently when you were talking to me about it, Mark, when we've spoken before. So it may be 2 others on the call as well. It might not. It might have just been me. But I think that it's a great point there about how you've got one community of people, but it's not one community. I should have mentioned right at the start about the kind of intersectionality that we always need to consider in terms of, the sort of challenges and people's lived experience. But I think that's a great example of how you've almost diversified within one community, recognizing needs and so on. If you were to kind of finish on talking a bit about obviously the journey where you've got done, we've kind of covered those bits in terms of what you think in it makes it inclusive that you don't think you've touched on, and how as well, or what else you would encourage others to think about in this space if they were setting up similar sessions. That would be fun.
I mean, very early on, we were a big group. We started with 64 people running, and it was always about 50 people a week. And now we get about 80 people a week come running on a Tuesday. People always tell us they're not really runners. They run really slowly. They just want to make friends. And we realise, this is not a running club. This is a social group that happened to go and do a bit of a jog. And after our first couple of months, we decided we would start a Couch to 5K program. And there was a couple of people, Hannah and Nathan mostly, who lead, again, for free and volunteer to lead this 10-week Couch to 5K program. And we've done that now. Is it 2 times, Adam, or 3 times?
Yeah, every last 2 Januaries, it's their courses run.
And it's that opportunity for people who, who don't run at all, but are desperate to meet people and socialize and have those connections, and also then get moving. So they've been really popular, and I think the other bit that we've back on the kind of the Flinter thing is we got feedback saying, like, do any women come to this? Is it all men? And before we started the Flinter Thursdays, we realized that our big group photo that we take every week looks like you don't see anybody but the men. So we just had a little tweak and was like, we'll have the big group photo and then anybody else have another group photo, so that it is clear on social media that there are a group of people who come running with us regularly that aren't the men. And it whatever we do, it's always about showing that there are lots of people from all aspects of the community that participate in this. And they just need to feel seen. And when people are seen, the group grows naturally. And I think we've kind of done that quite well. I think it's worth kind of mentioning this new kind of refugee partnership as well, Adam.
Yeah, definitely. just before you can explain that, something I just wanted to touch on before I forget, as well, about Couch to 5K, is that we, by design, made it so that the Couch to 5K group ran at the same time and warmed up alongside the core group, so you felt like you were part of the group from day one, even though you were only running for 2 minutes, and then everyone ends up back at the Lord Roberts. So from day one, you've got that sort of opportunity to meet people and build community. So it's straight, hit the ground running, literally, essentially, is how we wanted to sort of engineer that, to make it as welcoming as possible. Mark, do you want to speak about the refugee connection, just because I know that you've had more to do with that than I have?
It's, I mean, this is well in its infancy, but again, kind of on the diversity side of it, and Adam said, like, it's three white men that run gay white men that run a running club. You know, we're always aware of diversity, and it's always a talking point and a feedback. We have a runner called Noah who volunteers at the Notts Refugee Forum, and there is an LGBTQ plus group in the Refugee Forum. Noah's identified that they know about the running club, they don't have running kit, and that's the barrier. So Noah is collecting from the group old running shoes, old running shorts, running shirts, anything to help these people take part. And I think whatever we do, our goal is always make it free, make it simple, make it visible, and the people will come. We just want to bring as many barriers down as possible.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Adam, for coming in and inputting today. That's been great to listen to. Some really strong messages there around creating social connections in terms of that being the safe space and the purpose why people come. Being really clear with your comms that it's as inclusive as possible, so people can see themselves in stuff, to encourage them to come. And those inclusive design principles of let's all just warm up together and then we can get, like, I love that really simple thing that you could implement in other bits. So some great stuff in there. I'm going to move this on because we've got lots to get through, but thank you so much for contributing today. I'm going to move us on to Rachel, Dr. Rachel Bullingham, who is going to give us a bit of her experience around research into trans men and their experiences and how that links with being active. So Rachel, I think you've got a few slides that you're going to share.
I'm hoping that you'll be able to see it in a second. My computer does sound like it's taking off, but I'm hoping that this is going to work.
Yeah,
it's just apparently just working out a few things. I can't see them on my screen, but can you see my slides yet? Oh, yeah, great. Oh, okay. I can't see them. Oh, there we go. They've finally arrived. Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's great to celebrate Pride Month and be here with you as another active partnership. I'm a trustee at Active Gloucestershire, so I know the fantastic work that active partnerships do. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about a project we did about transgender experiences of men. I kind of got into this area by accident. One of my dissertation students decided that this is an area that they wanted to look at a few years ago. And as a result of that project, we've kind of done lots of work with we've worked with the national governing body, and we're currently doing another project on trans men. So if anyone has any trans men that they think would like to speak to us about their experiences in sport, we are updating the paper that I'm going to tell you about today. So one thing that we found was within the LGBTQ plus community, trans men aren't often talked about, and it's often a kind of area that it isn't particularly explored, particularly at the moment. And the issue we have at the moment is that there is a lot of noise, I think is the right word, particularly around the media. And trans inclusion in sport is really pitched as two sides to a debate. So what one side is to save women's sport, And that is particularly, we see that really evident, particularly in America at the moment, with Donald Trump signing various things into law about saving women's sport. And if he ever goes off on one of his longer rants, he does tend to talk about trans women in sport. And the other side of the argument is that trans people belong in sport, and often in the media, these two sides of the argument are pitched against each other, and it tends to be that we can't really have a discussion. So we want to, part of our work is to make sure that we can have a discussion about trans inclusion in sport that is thoughtful and sensible, and hopefully without people getting cross and shouting at each other. But what we noticed was on this debate that is framed by the media, and at the moment it's a pretty hot debate. It only focuses on women in sport, and so we wanted to look at the trans men and their experiences in sport, and they're often not discussed, predominantly because they're not winning. If I'm honest, they don't tend to be making the same strides in terms of taking those headlines that is often kind of causes sparks for debate in trans women participating in sport. And so what we decided, or what our dissertation student decided to do, was interview some trans men and hear about their experiences in sport. And what we're doing at the minute is trying to kind of get more of those experiences so we can build on this work that we have started. So our paper is, I can put the link to the or the title of the paper in the chat for people afterwards. But we aim to examine trans men experiences in sport, in PE, physical activity, and so on. And we interviewed 7 trans men. Often samples are much bigger than that, but actually trying to get hold of a quite difficult cohort to kind of get into, particularly all the researching team were cisgender women. So trying to find trans men to talk to is actually quite difficult. And we're certainly finding that with our project that we're doing at the moment. They're quite a difficult cohort to speak to. So we're quite pleased with 7 men. And our undergraduate student did all of the interviews for us. She did a fantastic job. And then we kind of took the data and created this new framework. So the framework that we've created that has 3 kind of elements of psychological, corporeal, and structural nature of dysphoria. So I'll just talk through those kind of 3. So the psychological is how people feel about their gender identity, their bodies, their perception of others, and so on. So things like being able to pass. So for those that don't know that kind of terminology on the call, that is being able to walk into a space and somebody not misgendering you. So often trans men tend to grow a beard. It's one of the easier visual ways to pass. And there was a real fear about misgendering from the participants that we spoke to, and a perception of what others thought of them, particularly around bathrooms and changing spaces. And there was a real emotional impact around kind of being able to pass, or being that fear of misgendering was very clear and very impactful for the people that we spoke to. The corporeal nature of dysphoria, and that this is a kind of mismatch between their bodies, and we looked at that in different. Well, we found from the data that coming out in different ways. So people talked about their voice, so being really high. One participant said that when they were in bathrooms, if somebody kind of held the door open or did something where they would normally say thank you, they wouldn't say anything, because their fear was if they said thank you in a high voice, they would then be misgendered and be questioned about why they were in that particular space. So there was definitely kind of elements around voice, particularly before. For some of our participants, it got a lot lower. There was issues around bodies, so particularly with binding, so binding breasts. And this was particularly evident around physical activity and the safety element of binding in physical activity, and the participants feeling the need to do that, but knowing at the same time it wasn't a particularly safe thing to be doing. So there was a real kind of element there around what they were feeling like, but also knowing about safety. So constricting the chest, but also getting very hot and sweaty and so on, and restricting that element of therefore restricting kind of physical activity. And also we talked about height, so being smaller, and some wore elements in their shoes, but again they couldn't necessarily do that for physical activity and sport. So there was a fear that they were smaller, and therefore that kind of impacted what sort of physical activity that they wanted to do. In terms of structural nature of dysphoria, for anyone who has worked in this space, the stories are really challenging to listen to, if I'm really honest. One of the things for me is the media perception of trans individuals compared to the real life lived experience that we've listened to are so substantially different that if actually people just sat down and listened to trans people's stories, I think a lot would certainly have a lot more empathy. You know, the legal changes, the cost of having to change certificates and so on, and also navigating the system. Some of them are talking about 7+ years on waiting lists. You know, that initial appointment certainly taking a very long time, and that has only increased recently. So starting to get into the system, and that transition time taking so long, and throughout that time, I guess if we're thinking about physical activity, about where they belong in that time, because if you're waiting 7 years for an appointment, where are you going to take part in physical activity? Where is your space in that time? Where do you feel like you belong? And there was such a clear message, and a lot of our participants were young, and they had used the space between school and college to start to use different names and so on, but the actual structural nature of that dysphoria took so long for them to do that actually when we're thinking about physical activity, that's quite key in terms of how we can support people and where they feel that they fit in within that time and space in their journeys. So our they were the kind of the three elements that we found from the data, or that were really clear within the data that we found. But and we are very clear that we are three cisgender researchers, so we are looking at it through a cisgender lens. So we want to make that super clear with the paper. It was our analysis of the words of our trans participants, and we're ever so grateful for them giving up their time. And that's kind of why we want to do the project again. We want to get potentially older trans men to see how they're navigating that physical activity space. And we also, the work we've done with the national governing body, we did workshops with participants after having collected the data, just to make sure that we'd interpreted it in the right way. So we are very aware that this paper was through our lens, but hopefully it gives a kind of snapshot of the experiences of trans men participating in sport and physical activity, and the kind of challenges that they particularly face. I'm very happy to take questions, Rachel, but that's kind of the main bit of the presentation, if that's okay. I know I had to be quick.
Thank you so much. Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, please just encourage people still, if you're thinking about questions, pop them in the chat if you want to do it that way. And yeah, we can ask some of those throughout. And if you've got thoughts afterwards, then please, and you're not sure where to go, please come to us. Initially, we can signpost to people like Rachel and others that are on the call. So yeah, if you've got questions in your head, please do ask them at some point. Thanks for that, Rachel. Really appreciate your input as well. I think there's probably a piece in there about, you know, there may be some on the call now, but just across our networks and so on across the counties and further, kind of there's people on the call from further today, how we can support that kind of research. Like Rachel's been pointing out, there is a gap, and that's why that piece in Manchester was done as well. There is a gap in research, so the more we can support to encourage people who have got that lived experience to share, the better. Because like Rachel pointed out, if we could just listen more to lived experience, it can make a huge difference in this work. I'm going to move us on to Shell. Shell, if you would like to come in. Shell's going to talk about hello, the work that you started around inclusive swimming. Yeah, we can hear you all good, all fine. So yeah, you're going to talk to us about your inclusive swimming work that you've been doing in Nottingham and now Derby, excitedly. And I'm sure it'll build on some of the stuff that we've been talking about. So if you want to just kick us off by telling us what is the session that you started, when did it start, why did you do it? Just a little bit about that.
Yeah, no worries. It started about 3 years ago now. I realised I love swimming, and I'm non-binary, so I found it very awkward and very intimidating going into a normal, regular swimming pool. And I realised at the time, I can't be the only person that feels like that and thinks like that. So I approached the Spencer Trust and I said to them, if I hire out a swimming pool for the gay community, would you fund it? And they bit my hand off and said, yes, absolutely. And from the very first go, it's been a success. It's been absolutely fantastic. And so I started off at Belper Leisure Centre, and then I moved to Nottingham. And then I found out I was only doing one a month at the time. And then I spoke to the people that came, and they asked for having it twice a month. So now we do twice monthly swims. We do longer swim sessions, and it's fantastic. We get new people coming every week, every couple of weeks. We get the same people coming every couple of weeks as well, and the feedback we get from it is fantastic. You know, the trans, especially the trans people, the trans and non-binary people that come are absolutely they just love it. They think it's one of the most amazing things they can do. And you know, I've had people come in and say they've not been swimming since they've transitioned more than 25 years ago. They've not felt comfortable to go into a swimming pool, even though they've had their operations and things like that. They just don't feel comfortable. So I then realised that this space is needed. It's I have just been building on that and making sure that we are providing that space for them. So yeah.
Thanks for that, Shell. I think that helps to paint a picture with the why, and thanks for sharing your kind of lived experience in that space. It'd be good too if you could touch on, because you've been working with obviously a couple of leisure operators now to set up the space. You've mentioned Belper, and then I know you said you've moved to the Lenton Centre and other places. Do you just touch on what were some of the practical bits that you've had to build into your session to help people sort of feel safe and come along?
So basically I've personally spoken to the managers at all the leisure centres that I've got in contact with, and I have basically put out a checklist, basically, you know, changing room facilities. Can we have the space and the changing rooms a good 20 to 30 minutes after the public have been in, so then we've got our own space so nobody goes into the changing rooms and people are coming in and out, so that the community can feel comfortable going in knowing that they're the only ones in those changing rooms. And some leisure centres, like the Lenton Leisure Centre, has gender changing rooms. So I spoke to the manager and we've basically made them non-gender changing rooms. So all I do is when it's our swim, I cover up the signs for the male and females. They put in changing pods that are easy to assemble, so each changing room gets individual changing pods in them as well. So then that gives people a bit more privacy if they are still a bit too shy about getting changed. So yeah, so I think it works well because I'm very involved in making sure that it is exclusive and it is private, but also that we enjoy ourselves and we're relaxed as well. And knowing that, you know, I speak to the lifeguards a lot of the time as well. I let them know what to expect, and we don't get no any aggro, any hassle off anybody, and it's really, really, you know, really nice and relaxed.
That's brilliant. Thank you for those bits. I was just going to go on.
Yeah, sorry, I was just about to say, I also obviously, because of people obviously wanted in Nottingham, I got people, we were coming all the way from Derby and Leicester, and so that's what made me realise, well, this space is needed. I am now going to take this to Derby. I am going to take this to you guys, and basically it's just about providing that safe space. If you provide that safe space, they will come, and that's all what it is about. And we was talking about trans men in the previous person, Rachel was talking about trans men, and I've noticed a lot of trans men that come pre-surgery, they come after surgery, and it's given them the confidence to come into my sessions. It's now given them the confidence to go to their own leisure centre up the road, because now they know they can feel comfortable and relaxed in doing that. But to do that, they have to, you know, they come to my sessions, like I say, they'll have tape on, bound, and you know, you can see scars, but they're very, very relaxed and comfortable, and that's what it's all about, really. So
yeah, I love that point, because I think we can talk sometimes about how inclusive spaces are needed to be inclusive, which is a lot of what you're talking about and what Mark and Adam touched on before, but sometimes recognising, like you said with that example, that some people need that exclusive space initially to feel safe, build up confidence is a massive thing, and then they can go on to other things. And just to touch on the Lenton Centre ago, like Brendan couldn't be here today who works there, but he kind of wanted to stress that, you know, some of the work that, like, he very much sees the work that they've done with yourself as being really, really engaging, really important, and quite straightforward as their experience as a leisure operator. You know, they've talked about how, you know, some of these changes that they've made were quite small, and it's quite easy for them to work with you to kind of make it happen. He made quite an interesting point as well about how, from his perspective, the centre doesn't have that great outreach compared to what you do, Shell. So there's a point on how do our leisure providers work with trusted community people and groups in order to connect with more groups. If you were to finish on anything around just what you would suggest to others who are wanting to set up similar things, or people on the call that are trying to build their understanding in this space, what kind of things would you kind of stress at this point to help other people create safe spaces?
Listen and get involved yourself. Be the first person, be the first point of contact, and if you want to create something, then do it. But obviously you've got to listen and just be considerate and understanding, and just know that not everybody's got the same experiences, so you've just got to just be helpful. And I personally do it myself, so I know it's all set up, it's all correct, and everybody is if there's any issues, then it comes back on me. But I personally attend every single session, so that I know that everybody is safe and comfortable and having a really nice time. And that's all it's all about, really, just providing a safe, welcome environment. And like I say, so providing that area, providing that space, people will come. So
brilliant. Thank you. That's a great point to end with, and backs up what we've heard before, just about listening to people, listening to lived experience, and showing up and making it happen. So thank you so much. Appreciate you today and all the work that you're doing, as others on the call are doing. So we will move to our final speaker. So we've got Jules joining us from Everyone Active. Thank you so much for joining us today. Jules, do you want to firstly just tell us a bit about your role across the organisation?
Yes, Jules Twells, pronouns she, her. I'm the National Inclusion and Wellbeing Manager for Everyone Active. So everything to do with inclusion falls within my remit, and we operate across 70 facilities. So they're either leisure centres, golf clubs, or theatres. We've got 17,000 colleagues across 70 contracts, so we're absolutely massive, and we operate in Ashfield and Derby. within your active partnerships.
We're saying, if Shell didn't already point it out before, I can't remember whether you did, that the latest location for that inclusive swimming through that group is at the Derby based centre through Everyone Active. So a great link into yourself and talking about, I guess initially just a bit about why it's important to the organisation to create safe spaces for this community in particular.
Well, I mean, the simple answer is that we're everyone active. So, and obviously one of our core values across the organisation is that everyone matters, that we respect and include everyone. We're there as a public sector provider to support the whole of the community. That said, we're not naive enough to think that our brand's name is enough to make people feel safe, but it is embedded across the culture of our organisation through our values, our brands, training and interactions with clients, customers and colleagues, that we are there for everyone to be active. And as a public sector provider, we serve the whole of the community to tackle inequalities which exist within underrepresented populations, including LGBTQ plus communities. And our aim is to increase participation and provide opportunities for people to be active. And LGBTQ plus communities is always included within our contractual obligations when we tender for business. In terms of in terms of what that looks like, it looks very different in different places. Obviously, we've got an inclusive approach because we've only got a finite amount of time, timetable opportunities in terms of the programs that we deliver. So we try to do an inclusive approach, and we've had many debates internally about what inclusion means. And with external partners as well, because, in a different context, I work in disability sport, and we know that our inclusive swim sessions target disabled people, but they don't necessarily just want to swim with disabled people. So, that could be said of LGBTQ plus communities, but we also recognise that we need to develop programmes that make people feel safe and that they belong in the first place, and then have those, specialised separate programmes for them. So that's what we've started to do with Shell, as you mentioned, at Derby Moorways.
Yeah. And is there anything else in that you want to build on, just about some of the work that you've done, some of the sort of practical bits that you've done to create those safe spaces? I know we've touched on, it was interesting, the lived experience piece with your colleagues and your staff, and just the importance of that bit in this work as well.
Yeah, so we want, obviously, our colleagues, we 2P over a lot of colleagues, and because we take on, the way the leisure industry works, we take on new contracts as and when. And what we essentially want to do is to make sure that our colleagues represent the communities we serve. So when I first came into role about 3.5 years ago, I set up an inclusive advisory group across group managers within the organisation, and then a diversity inclusion champions network of lived experience from different protected characteristics, so they could feed into the policies, processes, anything across the whole group, and whether that's related to training, recruitment, marketing, so that they could talk about their lived experience and influence those group managers across such a huge organisation and be representative. I mean, we've tried quite a few things. We were the first operator as well in terms of making our swimwear policy inclusive. We wanted that to be non-gendered. We set up events with organisations like Swim England, Out to Swim and Pride in Water, and did family pride events during the local prides across 10 of our sites where we thought that would work. And obviously we're involved very much in the code of practice for the industry, and I'm working closely with the UK Active to see how we can ensure that we've got spaces for LGBT, well, particularly the transgender community, to feel that there's a space for them within our changing toilet facilities moving forward.
That's great, thanks for that. I mean, across all that work for yourself, is there, if you're thinking of the experience that you've had so far and colleagues, is the stuff that you've learned that would be useful to share? And I guess thinking again of question of how we can all be creating safe spaces. So anything that you've learned which would help kind of support others, guide others in this work.
Well, I think because we're such a vast organisation and cover all different areas, from my perspective, one size doesn't fit all, you know, and from a national perspective, you know, I want to pick up good practice and for us to deliver certain programmes that work in all areas, but it depends on the demographics of that local area. So I think what we've learned is obviously we need to have that local consultation and co-design programs with the local community. We don't just parachute in and deliver sessions. We want to make sure that they are reaching the underrepresented communities and tackling health inequalities. You know, just that exercise of the 10 Pride swims, we chose areas like Sunderland, Bristol. We'd got one site in Manchester where we thought they would work, and they worked in some areas, they didn't work in others. But we worked with partners to develop that. And I'm sure if we worked in, you know, Manchester city centre or Brighton, for example, they would have worked better. So yeah, obviously all sites sit under the Everyone Active brand. We take on sites all the time, so it's developing that culture as a brand for Everyone Active and instill the values in the new sites that we operate, which could be quite different when we take them over.
That's great. Thank you so much. Appreciate your input again alongside everyone else there. I know everyone's busy doing lots of different bits. So thank you for contributing today and again for all your work in this space. So again, some really great messages there. I think that lived experience bit, you know, let's think about it from not just people that we're trying to impact to move more, but the colleagues that are working around us, whether that's within leisure teams or within smaller charity organisations, whoever, you know, we can pull on that lived experience to create that sense of belonging. Thank you for, you know, reflections that are going on in the chat and some bits, and for people sharing contacts. As I said before, please do ask any questions if you've got them, or come to us to help have conversations kind of outside of this. I've just shared that outside of this session today. So what we'd like to finish on is just felt like a really opportune moment to share a relatively new video which we put together, which tries to sum up what being an active bystander in the kind of context of being active and moving more looks and feels like. You may well be very aware of kind of active bystander and kind of what it kind of means in practice and so on. It's just from the stuff that we've heard today, I touched on at the start about that kind of what society looks and feels like and some of the discrimination that people are facing. I think a message throughout is that we can all be kind of allies in this space and be kind of challenging when we're seeing that practice maybe not happening for different reasons. So I am just going to share this and play this. It's only a couple of minutes long.
We all deserve to be part of a community where we feel safe and free to be who we are. However, many of us have a negative experience in our communities through discrimination, bullying, and harassment. We know this stops people moving more. This isn't fair. We can all support our communities by being an active bystander and taking action against problematic behaviour. All of our actions matter. We all know this unacceptable behaviour happening around us. It could be sexual harassment, a homophobic joke, or a racist comment. Sometimes it can be hard to identify these problematic behaviours. We can all learn by listening to the lived experience of others, helping us to understand and support those around us. It can be hard to stand up and intervene when we witness something. Often we are unsure whose responsibility it is to step in. We are all responsible for keeping our communities and spaces safe. It's only by taking collective responsibility that we can ensure everyone feels safe We might see negative behaviour from our friends as well as strangers, and it can feel awkward or scary to intervene. However, if we act, we may save someone from an experience that is going to change their lives forever. Understanding the 5 Ds can give us the confidence to handle situations. Distract. Break up the incident by engaging with the person being targeted and ignoring the perpetrator. You could ask for the time or directions. Delegate. Find someone else to help you or in a position of authority to step in. This could be a receptionist at a leisure or community centre or an instructor in a class. Delay. If you can't act in the moment, you can check up on the person being targeted afterwards. You could ask, "Are you okay? I'm sorry that happened to you." Or, "Do you want to report the incident?" Direct. Confronting the perpetrator is the most direct intervention tactic. Before you step in, assess everyone's safety. If it's safe to do so, tell the perpetrator specifically what is wrong with their behaviour. You could tell them what you observed. After, turn your attention to the person being targeted. Check in on them and remove them from the situation. Only do this if it is safe for you and the person being targeted. However, if the person being targeted is at serious risk, call the police immediately. Document. If someone is already helping the person being targeted and it feels safe to do so, film the incident. This can help with reporting it. Include landmarks and say the date and time. Ask the person what they want to do with it. Never post online. You can learn more about how to call it out by accessing active bystander training or resources. Visit www.makingourmove.org.uk for more details. Every one of us can make a difference. Every one of us can call it out.